I get this question about once a week. What are the best video settings for the Canon DSLR cameras? So let me start off by eliminating two things that you could take off the list, and those are Aperture and ISO. Aperture, I really can't tell you what to set it on because it depends on the type of look you're going after, with the shallow depth of field or not. And the other one's ISO. ISO is kind of there for exposure, how you're going to set the exposure. I will say you don't want to go too far north of, let's say, 1600, especially like on the Canon T2i. Then it gets really noisy. Obviously, you're going to need to use Aperture along with the ISO to get the right exposure, but at least to get you in the ballpark. Those two ingredients are pretty much taken off the list. So the first thing I can tell you about what's on the list is shutter speed. So basically, if you're going for a filmic look, you're going to pretty much double the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, you're going to want a 1/50th of a second shutter speed. And if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, you're going to go with 125th frames per second shutter speed. Now I will tell you, those are kind of just a guideline, a rule, but I've shot at much higher shutter speeds and it's worked wonderful, especially if you're shooting something like myself, which is just basically a moving head. If you're just getting your feet wet with the camera, I think one of the best settings for picture styles is standard. I use it 90% of the time. If you're outside filming a landscape, for instance, you might want to try landscape. And if you're using kind of a close-in portrait shot, you might want to go with a portrait picture style. And after you've had the camera for a while and you're wanting to take it to the next level, you might want to create a very flat picture style, and then you can control more color, sharpness, and saturation in post. As for white balance, the best setting by far is going to be custom. This is where you get the perfect color temperature for your shot. This is the best way to do it, but it's also, unfortunately, the most time consuming. The best way to focus is to set it to quick focus and to focus on one of the many points within the viewfinder. This is my personal favorite way to do this. I'm sure there's other people that might disagree with me, but I've gotten really accurate, fast results using this method. Disable your AGC to get the cleanest audio. AGC is automatic gain control. I use a hack method for this, but there are other ways to do this as well, such as buying a JuiceLink box or use a software hack if you're brave enough to install it on your camera. Set the movie exposure to manual. This is the best way by not letting your camera decide for you. Grid display to grid 1. This helps me get my composition just right. Disable your highlight tone priority. I've done many tests with this and I found it's just best to leave it off. Auto lighting optimizer is set to standard. Again, I've done a lot of tests with this and I find that this setting is not only helps my portrait photos, but it even helps when I do video interviews and the lighting is not quite even on the person's face. Well, that's about it for the best settings you can use on your Canon DSLRs for video. Thanks for watching, and thanks for Darren for letting me do another guest post again.